the real growth and success that we've made in our relationship isn't because we worked on our marriage per se, but it's the pressures that we faced, the challenges that we had, and just that dynamic that we're trying to fix actually changed me. It changed me to be a different person. So let your marriages change you. Welcome to the Get Your Marriage On podcast. I'm your host, Dan Purcell, a Christian marriage and intimacy expert and coach. I'm on a mission to help couples have the best sex and most emotionally intimate marriages possible. Our episodes cover topics you've always wondered about and are packed with practical advice designed to help you take your marriage to the next level. There's definitely a spiritual element to developing an intimate marriage. For example, in order to have really good sex or really deep emotional connection with someone, it requires you to be more honest, true, chaste, benevolent, and in short, to do good to your spouse. It requires you to be able to endure all things and to have a lot of hope and do the little things every day, the little micro things that actually matter to build an intimate marriage. This weekend, I have the privilege of leading 16 couples at our upcoming couples retreat, and I am so excited. It's going to be an absolute blast. We're going to have a really good time, and we're going to dig deep into intimacy in our relationships. I hope you get to join us for our upcoming retreat. The date's already set. It's March 27 through 30, and you can find those details on our website. Today, I'm releasing a recording of a conversation I had with my good friend Rhonda Farr. If you don't know her, she is a marriage and intimacy coach, a lot like myself. And we had a fantastic conversation about how our marriage changes us rather than us trying to change our marriage. And this is really relevant because we're talking about the spiritual work of sexual development. This is the refining process. This is the parts of us that expand us in our marriages to become the better version of who we are. Now, one more announcement I have real quick is if you or your spouse have a hard time being present during sex or feel really self-conscious, have body image concerns, or just want to take something great to the next level, then you definitely want to sign up for this special seminar we're putting on starting next week, Wednesday. It's a sexual mindfulness seminar series, and I have a guest. Her name is Dr. Shalom Levitt. She's a world-renowned expert in the field of the cross-section of mindfulness and intimacy. And this is a fantastic lecture series. It's over 3 Wednesday nights with a lot of really fun at-home assignments you get to do in between to really help build this concept of mindfulness in your sexual experiences. And it's great for women and for men. And you'll find those details on our website also and in the show notes. Thank you again for listening to this podcast. We're going to begin now with Rhonda introducing me, and then you'll get to jump right into our conversation.
I'm Rhonda Farr, and today I have my friend Dan Purcell in the house. Dan is the podcast host of Get Your Marriage On, and he is the creator of the Intimately Us app. So we're talking to a man who has some experience in the world of relationships and intimacy, and he has some experience being a high achiever who's learning all these skill sets and learning how to create emotional connections himself in real life. So I love that today, Dan, that we have you here. I think you will identify with my listeners on multiple levels. So what would you like them to know before we get into the meat of this conversation?
Oh, that's a great intro. I've been married to my wife for over 20 years, and we have 6 children. And I like to run, I like to be goofy, and anything outdoors I love. So,
Amazing. 6 kids. That's no joke, right?
no joke.
Okay. So, Dan, when you and I first talked about this podcast, one of the things that you said you really enjoyed talking about that resonated most with me, I'm going to just read the phrase, and then I want to know what comes to mind for you when I read your wording back. Marriage is trying to change and refine you, not the other way around. What do you mean by that? And what are you excited about when it comes to that topic?
That's right. So, in our struggles, in our marriages, in our relationships, we often think, I got to fix my marriage. I got to fix my relationship. And that's a very common way of thinking. But I think if you zoom out a bit more, you'll realize it's the other way around. Your marriage is trying to change you and refine you. And I have a little story about that if you want.
Yeah.
There was a season in my marriage where we had sexual desire discrepancies, mismatched libidos, as some people say, which is a very common concern, right? Almost every marriage has that kind of a thing. But I was trying to fix the marriage. I'm like, "Hey, honey, we need to work on our marriage." And the way I would say that is very similar to how one spouse might turn to another and say, "Hey, we should go to the gym to lose weight." What they're really saying is, "You need to go to the gym to lose weight." Right? But thinking that we are gonna work on our marriage, we're gonna work on these things. And now that we're through that, years later, looking back, the real growth and success that we've made in our relationship isn't because we worked on our marriage per se, but it's the pressures that we faced, the challenges that we had, and just that dynamic that we're trying to fix actually changed me. It changed me to be a different person. So let your marriages change you. See your relationship struggles for what they are, and they're going to have a stronger effect on you to refine you and change who you are. It's like that crucible, right? That refines you. Your marriage can be one of those blessings that refine you to make you a better person than the other direction where you're trying to fix your marriage.
Ooh, I feel that on a deep level. When you were saying that, everything in my body was like, yes. I'll tell you something that I feel sometimes in my marriage because my husband and I, same as you, we struggled a lot. In our first 5 years, I think we were both like, do we even want to stay married? Like, we didn't even know if we'd married the right person, which, by the way, I think is very common for you to think maybe I married the wrong person. So you're
Uh-huh.
not alone
Right.
in that,
Uh-huh.
dear listener. But some people will say, well, what did you do to come so far? How did you like change that? And they want you to give them this prescription of, we spent 10 minutes a night chatting, or we went on a walk together, or we did. And certainly those can be a portion of it. But it's very hard to articulate when somebody asks me that way because it's exactly what you said. We changed ourselves. We became more comfortable facing our own emotions, our own patterns, our own childhood patterns, right? Like that's really what changed our marriage because we were willing to change ourselves. And I think it's really difficult to articulate that. What do you think about that?
Yes, agreed, 100%. If you ask us what changed, it'd be hard to identify, oh, it's because we signed up for this program or we went on this retreat or we bought this book or we had the talk and I finally told her everything and then she finally understood it. And it was a communication issue. No, it's usually not like that, but it's an accumulation of many little things. But it's really about a change, that a shift that happens deep internally first that affects everything in a positive direction.
Yeah, and I think that's why you said in the beginning, good coaching, good therapy, whatever it is, wherever you choose to go. That's why that's so important because we're not changing the other person in that setting. We're not going in and just a hyper focus on behaviors. We're helping you come in and address who you are. What makes you up? Like I try to think about it like the algorithm of the brain. Like what's in your algorithm that's giving the output that you currently have right now? That's what we want to start working with.
Yes. Can I talk on that algorithm a bit? A lot
Please.
of times, I believe my background is in computer science. That's what my college degree is in. So I love the idea of thinking away of things in systems. And a relationship is really a system on a wide scale, like our country or your workplace is a system, but down to an atomic level, like you and your wife together form a system also. So there's a dynamic. And think of systems like a Ferris wheel. You know how there's different cars around the wheel and it rotates and it goes around and around? Oftentimes, our systems and our relationship are like that. So, back to the desire discrepancy, I would approach my wife because it's been a few days and I'd start making comments about kind of what I wanted to do. But she would react to that in a negative way. She'd distance herself. It'd be a put off to her, not something that would endure her to me with the way I was approaching things. So that's the next car on the Ferris wheel, right? So she's back withdrawing a bit, and I'd say, "Hey, what's going on?" And I'd pursue a little more, and then she'd withdraw, and then I'd pursue a little more. And finally, I knew her breaking point because I know I could get her to accommodate because she's a tender soul. She would accommodate, and then I'd get what I thought I needed, but then I'd feel really empty afterwards. And then the cycle would start all over again. See how it's like a system? Now you can break this down, you can write it out if you want to, but as you really look at every interaction and how one person reacts to the other, which reacts to the next. And you can see that cycle and then zoom out a bit. Then you can ask yourself that question, what? And it doesn't matter who, right? Because it's a system. She could change or I could change, but what aspect can I respond in a better way here? And this is where like thought work comes in, understanding your body and everything that you teach, Rhonda, and everything you've taught me too, like helping you kind of see and understand all of those. And you can start at any node you want, but it is a system. Once you can zoom out and see that, and it just takes a few adjustments, and it'll light the path for a new direction to go, and you can improve your systems.
It's a really great way of thinking about that. Since you brought it up, talking about feeling in the body, thought work, all those things that you and I have approached together at times. What's it like for you to start feeling into the body and approaching from that particular part of the system? Because I think for many of my listeners, and I might be projecting here, so you tell me if I'm wrong, I think even for you at times that was a little awkward or uncomfortable, or maybe you didn't even quite understand the point. Can you tell me what that's like to think about approaching from some of those vantage points or those little Ferris wheel carts that maybe aren't our favorite things to look at?
Right. And I guess for the listener's sake, it'll make more sense than my answer to put it in context. I coached with you twice. I think I worked with you for 6 months, and then that engagement ended. And then a few years later, I returned and had another second 6-month engagement with you. And during our first 6 months together, I remember you over and over saying, "Tell me the feeling. What color is it? What shape is it? What does it look like?" And I was like, "Rhonda, it's none of those." And just having just a hard time because it's so abstract to me.
Yeah.
And then after just more life experience and then returning the second time, it was a very different experience because I now understood what those feelings felt like, because for me, the key was learning the value of stillness in my life, because I'm always on the go, 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 move, move. And that's how I kind of related to the world around me and to my relationships. Things got to be moving. I derive my value from what I can produce. Therefore, I'm going to produce at every waking moment I can produce, move, and move. But there's no time for stop and stillness. So once I incorporate more stillness into my life, and I could really like listen internally, what's going on internally, then it's like, oh, maybe this is what Rhonda was talking about, like this emotion or that feeling. Oh, that's why this or that. So for me, it was the power of stillness is what helped me understand what the internal workings of like emotion. And emotion is very powerful. To me, emotion and spiritual are really closely connected within me. And it's that energy force that drives us towards things we want or helps us avoid things we don't want. Everything kind of, in the end, I think they boil down to one of those two things. So emotion is important, but understanding what those emotions are and what they're trying to say and do, to me, required more stillness to really tap into to feel.
Yeah, it's hard. Thank you for sharing that experience. And I'll give a little nod to the Get Your Marriage On podcast. You and I did an episode for your podcast, and we shared a little story on there about what you just said. I have a person in my life who was having an interaction with their partner. She got triggered. And in the moment, that's what she said. She's like, I felt it in my body first. And that was a signal. Like, I need to figure this out. Whereas in the past, she would have been like, well, you never, and you don't value it, and you won't. And it was like, no, I felt that. And then it allowed me to get curious, like you said, to get present and pause and get curious. And then let my partner ask questions that actually led them to a beautiful resolution and a beautiful moment of intimacy, or multiple moments of intimacy. So we'll direct them over to the Get Your Marriage On podcast to hear that story more in detail. But it's so valuable. It's so valuable. And in the moment when you're learning to feel, it can feel very uncomfortable and just pointless. I've had many people tell me, why are we doing this? I don't get it. Much like our first round, you probably felt.
Right, right. Mindfulness? No, I don't want to sit on a cushion thinking, counting my breath for 20 minutes. That's dumb. Not that I do that now, but I was very allergic to the idea before. But now I see the value in really going deep. What is going on internally, and I come out refreshed. So
And it can lead to really great sex too, if you can learn to do that.
absolutely,
We'll add that
yes.
bonus. Beautiful. Okay, I want to rephrase what we started with one more way, and I just want to see if you have any thoughts around the way I say it this time. I've heard a lot of people say you marry your unfinished business, which I
Hmm.
think it's very similar to the marriage is trying to grow and refine you, not the other way around. What do you think about you marry your unfinished business? Any thoughts about why we do that or how that might look in real time?
Well, let's talk about attraction. Naturally, you're going to be attracted to someone that has strengths in areas where you have weaknesses. That's why most people are attracted to the person that they married. If you're very outgoing, there's something sweet about someone who has like real depth of soul that knows quietness, right? So a lot of not everyone's this way, but a lot of extroverts marry introverts for that reason. Or very organized people who are very, check the box, everything needs to be done in the right order, tend to marry people that have the gift of being able to work out of order in chaos. Just naturally, you're gravitated towards your opposites, which in the beginning is so attractive. And then 18 months to 24 months after you're married, now you're like, why did I marry this person? Why can't they be more like me? Because the things that initially drew you to your spouse now become irritants in relationships, generally speaking. So when you say we marry our unfinished business, I do see to a degree there's that initial attraction bit. But we also look to others to varying degrees to help us make more sense of who we are personally. And because you don't go off to a mountain completely alone for a year and come back and emerge, I know who I am. That's not reality. We're social creatures and we live and evolve and grow by sharing our minds with other people. And that's why marriage can be so beneficial to an individual's growth because you have another brain there to work off of. It's kind of like having a good training partner or sparring partner in a way. If you can create a marriage where you can both be really honest with each other and help each other work on your own refinement and unfinished business in that way. But it breaks down when the factory settings turn on, so to speak, when you get hurt easily or you edit a lot of your words out of fear of what they're going to say in response. So you play small or you only show a side of you. So you're not fully honest because you're very reactive to your spouse's reaction, right? That's where it's a kind of a two-edged sword. So I do believe we kind of marry a person to help us with our unfinished business. But part of the process of staying in a long term committed relationship, that marriage, helps refine you when you harness the power of the marriage to help you in that direction.
I love that you used it in the framing of attraction too. I think that's really valuable because in the beginning, it is so attractive, like you said. And also, most of us get married when we're somewhat immature, right?
Well,
Emotionally,
no one is
intellectually.
right, right, exactly.
Yeah.
Nothing's going to prepare you for marriage with that person except for marriage itself. Even people who maybe lost their spouse and now they're in their 70s and they marry each other, there's still adjustments to be made that you couldn't have prepared for prior to that relationship. I lost my mother 2 summers ago. My father remarried, and there's adjustments in that relationship too. So it doesn't matter how mature you are, you're always going to run up against things in a marriage that are there to change you and refine you.
I love that. And I think too, what's attractive to you in one emotional state, it evolves and changes and vice versa for your partner too. And that's why it's so valuable to be able to tolerate those emotions as you learn to be honest, as you learn to be vulnerable, as you learn to grow and interact in new ways. I'll just put in another plug for emotions. You have to be able to tolerate a lot of discomfort to do the things that you were just describing.
Hmm.
Love that. Okay, Dan, I'm guessing somebody who likes systems might have systematized some relational things as well. And I want to ask you about the one, two, threes and the ABCs of a better sexual relationship. Tell me more about that. What does that mean? How can we look at this from maybe a systematized perspective? Because that's what it sounds like when I hear it that way.
Yeah,
Describe to me
yeah.
what it means.
So this isn't my own original idea. I've borrowed it from many others, and they use the same kind of concept, so they just use different words for it.
Okay.
So the way I'm going to present it is my understanding of a lot of these concepts. But You'll probably hear these concepts taught in different ways using different words. I like the idea of a three-stage framework. And I'm gonna use 3 stages to simplify. It does but stage 1 is the egocentric stage. Think about a child that, they're playing in the sandbox and they see another child playing with a toy they want. They don't care about the other child, they just want the toy. So they're just gonna take the toy with no regard to the other person, right? Well, this is also the stage where rules matter a lot. You tell your child, "We don't cross the street." It's very black and white. You just don't cross the street because they can't comprehend cars coming, not coming, anything. So it's always a very black and white type of a way of thinking around that. And a lot of adults carry a lot of this black and white thinking in certain areas of their relationship or certain areas of their life too. And then we grow as adults into the second stage, where this is when you recognize that my behavior actually has an impact on other people, and other people's behavior has an impact on me. And the way other people think actually really does matter. And this is a really great step forward because we need this type of mentality in order for societies to flourish. Like, think about a school. In order for the school to work well, you need people to be conscious of the way other people are thinking and feeling so that we have a good working system. Or the same with a country or any type of organization, even down to a marriage. It makes good sense to pay close attention to what your spouse is thinking and feeling so that you can develop more empathy, understanding of what's going on in their emotional state. And also recognizing the way they behave affects you. So it is definitely a step forward. But the trap of stage 2, and most of the people I work with, and Rhonda, I'm assuming you too, are going to somehow exhibit a lot of stage 2 trappings. This is like in the example I gave earlier of my own Ferris wheel was a very much of a stage 2 Ferris wheel because I would pursue my wife, she would withdraw. And she would withdraw in a way to let me know that she is withdrawing without using words, right? With her body language and just the energy she's given off is I am withdrawing from you. And I would react to that. So it's very much based on how can I get her to not withdraw? So I'm very hyper focused on changing my wife's behavior because I recognize I have an influence on her. Therefore, I can change her. And that's the fallacy of that stage 2, because we go for pseudo control. A lot of things we do for pseudo control fall into one of 3 categories. We pressure, that's like being the bully,
Mhm.
or we accommodate. For a lot of men, that looks like being the nice guy, which actually isn't really nice, or we withdraw. So it's those are the pressure, yield, and withdraw are the 3 ways we go about handling conflicts and managing our anxiety in that stage 2 frame. So if stage 1 is about really egocentric, things are black and white, I only care about what I want. Stage 2 is recognizing others have an impact on me and what other people think matters, yet other people's opinion of me really matters. Stage 3 is a evolution after that, and it is what I call the self-authoring stage. And this is the capacity to be in relationship with someone else while being able to handle your own thinking and holding on to your own mind and your own ideas and maybe live a little differently than the group wants you to behave or the relationship wants you to behave. But you're able to do it with your own clear thinking in it. So in sex, that might look like, again, back to that Ferris wheel of the pursuing and withdrawing and my wife eventually accommodating. It could look like I give myself a timeout here and I would see my normal pattern is to just accept the duty sex because, hey, some is better than none, or whatever I'd tell myself. But stop to realize, no, this isn't really the kind of relationship I want to make. And I'm going to break from the system and turn my wife down when she is offering sex, but I know it's accommodating. And that's going to make her really upset because she does not like to be rejected. She's offering sex after me asking for it, and I'm telling her no. She's going to get really upset. So there's so much pressure to conform and go back to our old pattern. But in that pressure, can you hold on to yourself enough to stay true to the better path that you know would be better? because there's enormous pressure to conform back to the way we have been doing. But that's why self-authoring is so important. I believe this is important. This is what I'm going to do. This is how I'm going to step through it. That's the magic of that three-stage framework. So it's kind of abstract, maybe too theoretical. No, it's not that theoretical. But I really like to think of sexual relationships or conflicts in sexual relationships as this might be a stage 1 problem or a stage 2 problem, or moving towards a stage 3 as the solution. And it always comes back to that self-authoring. I am the captain of my own ship. I'm the pilot of my own plane. I'm the author of my own story. What do I think is the very best move to make that's in line with my integrity in all of this? And that's when you can answer that question and act in line with that, I think our relationships always become stronger. We can act with more honesty. And that's really the only place you can actually love another person because you're no longer dependent on the way they react to what you do or don't do, because you can actually love them from a more solid place rather than a dependent place.
Hey, podcast interview over. You just told him what to do. Now go do it. I love what you said. And I'm thinking while you're saying this, especially when you said, I'm going to say no to her when I know she's just fulfilling an obligation or a duty because I want something better. So I'm going to say no and stay in alignment with myself. It's so beautiful. And I agree with you. And I'm hearing all the men out there being like, but if I say no, I might get nothing. And I think they're
Yeah,
scared to death
and you
to
might get
try
nothing.
down that. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So let's talk about that a little bit. Like, it's one thing to know, and I think most people listening would even agree, like, absolutely, Dan and Rhonda, that's exactly right. And I don't think I can do it. I don't know how to do it. So what would you say to the man listening who's saying, I don't think I can tolerate saying no and risking getting nothing?
Yeah, because it's very real, right? You're
Yeah.
not gonna go outside your marriage to get a fix, so to speak, right? And even if you did, it's not gonna be meaningful. But what you have now isn't quite working. You want more eroticism, you want more of that, that juicy, fun passion in your relationship. And it feels like turning your wife down when she's finally accommodating is kind of in that right direction. So saying no to that's gonna feel really hard because she might be relieved you said no, and she might go, "Ah, I'm off the hook. I
Woo.
tried. I'm done." Right? Like, not my problem or whatever. And it's a real risk. And I don't know, dear listener, I don't know your exact situation and the personality mix between you and your spouse, but I do know that not everything pans out. Not every story has a happy ending because people have the right to choose, and some people just don't choose. I am an optimist by nature. I think people at the core are good people. And of course, there's a lot of stories where let's talk about it. There's a reality that people choose otherwise or don't really fully step in with both feet in their relationship. And sometimes backing up a step and zooming out a little further and having a meta conversation about the issue, I find helpful. So this isn't talking about, why did you turn me down for sex conversation? It's a why do we get into this position all the time type of a conversation. So it's like taking a step back and talking a little bit more about what's going on under the hood with all of this.
Yeah.
And
I,
it's
I would
scary.
describe that getting a few layers beneath the
Yeah, yeah.
surface level. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, zooming out. Yeah, but you're not talking about the problem directly, you're talking about why you get into the problem or the pattern that you see. That's where the conversation goes. It's like, "I wonder if you really fully choose me."
Yeah.
That's the conversation. It's not, "Why do you keep giving me duty sex?" It's
Yeah.
you see how it's a layer lower.
Yeah, I like that. Okay, do you think there's a difference in a partner? We're kind of framing this as the wife as the lower desire partner, but just to be clear, it could be either. Do you think there's a difference in the lower desire partner coming in and saying, I'm not really feeling it right now, but I'm choosing it because I want to be with you and I'm choosing to step into this because I want to work on it versus, oh my gosh, I have to do this so he won't be whiny and mopey and so I don't have to have the consequences and the kids don't have to pay the consequences. in both cases, that lower desire partner, it might not be their first choice of activity, but their motives are different. Do you see a difference in that? How do you,
Absolutely. Like, it's the
yeah,
same action, right? But
yeah.
the motive is very different. And I think the difference between the two is the better version, the first example you gave. That's the one like, look, but I love him and this is important to me. Do you see it? It's self-authoring. It's about what I can step in and do. Whereas the second example, it's I'll throw him a bone, so at least he'll be off my back for 3 days or whatever, right? Do you see it's very other focused? So the
Mhm.
second example you gave is very stage 2. The first example you gave is very stage 3. So you can do the same action. The behavior looks the same, but the spirit, the energy, the motive is gonna be very different coming from whatever stage you're operating from.
Yeah, I think so too. And in your opinion, what's the harm? What's the problem in accepting the duty sex long term? What have you seen in your work and in your personal life of maybe letting that be the norm and continuing to participate?
Yes. I think the Disney movie Beauty and the Beast is a master class in answering that question. I assume a lot of listeners have seen that movie or are familiar with the story. So the gist of it is the beast needs a woman to fall in love with him before the last rose petal falls, or else he's going to remain the beast forever and his kingdom will be a forgotten kingdom. And they keep devolving, right? Belle comes into his life and he captures her and forces her to like him. And none of those attempts are really working, even though things are progressing. And at the very crucial moment when the very last rose petal is about to fall, what does the beast do? He lets Belle go. And everyone in the cast's like, "You let Belle go? Like, are you out of your mind? Like, she was our last chance and you actually let her go?" Do you see how much courage that took the beast to do? Because he realized in order for her to really fully choose him, she had to have a choice. And because it's a Disney movie, she ends up coming back and choosing him, and it all works out. But when we continue a pattern of duty sex or obligation sex, and a lot of men I coach who are the higher desire spouse keep that frame alive. They they are participating in that Ferris wheel dynamic of ensuring to remind their wife that they have a duty here, have an obligation here. You're you're limiting choice, and you end up creating a marriage with very little passion. It's the captive trying to satisfy the beast. And another thing it does is anytime in a marriage relationship that's not equals anymore, not on equal standing, you've broken that and now you've created rank or hierarchy where one becomes more important than the other. You set yourself up where the only way you keep that alive requires accommodation or pressuring or yielding to keep that system functioning. So you're going to set yourself up in a relationship where there's going to be no passion because there's no choice and there's going to be no full self in it. So you got to do away with the obligation and duty frame.
Yeah, the way you're describing it, it sounds like you're creating an obstacle to the very thing you want most. As long as
Yeah,
you're approaching from neediness and duty, the only thing she can give you is out of obligation. If it's a need and a duty, where's the desire? Where's the choice?
right.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes sense. Ah, I love it. I love talking about this. Okay, Dan, do you have time to answer 2 more questions?
Let's do it.
Okay, here are the 2 questions. You can answer them independently or together. And obviously, this is going to be a generalization. So I'm going to frame it up that way. It's a generalization that might not fit for everybody. But in your opinion, what would it be most helpful for women to understand about marriage and intimacy more? And what do you think would be most helpful for men to understand differently? Or what's most frequently misunderstood about marriage and intimacy for men?
Oh, that's a great question. And I haven't had a ton of time to think about this, but this is just off the cuff. This is what I'm thinking. So what is most missed for men and women? I think a lot of women wish they were seen by their husband more for who they are. Uh, okay, it's not a secret that my wife and I have sex, so I guess it's okay to share on the podcast. We're making love the other night. We're getting into it. And, you can tell when your spouse like breaks the connection because they're thinking about kids or the shopping list or whatever. Like, this is typical, right? Like, we're an ordinary couple. My old self would have been, like, a little upset. Like, "Come on, we're here. We're doing this right now, and this is antithetical to arousal. We want lots of arousal now," right? Right? And, kinda getting a little upset here, a little defensive too, maybe. And I made a different move this time, and I think this is what I'm trying to say is, I got really curious. What is it? What's your biggest stress right now? I can tell things aren't progressing for you, arousal-wise. What's going on? And we're able to just lay there side by side for a half hour and just talk about things. And I just wanted to see her, right? It's about being I wanted to see her. I wanted to see her and where she was and everything. So I think a lot of wives wish they were just seen more.
Mm.
The reason why I answered that way is because it's something I'm working on. I'm working on seeing my wife more because I think that's what I need to work on. So that's the way I answered that question.
I love that. And really, that's intimacy. I always say to my clients when they talk about something similar to this, we think about intimacy as being all hot and sweaty and passionate, physical. And that's true. Like that can be a beautiful part of it. I don't want to pretend that's not important. But this part of intimacy that you're talking about right here feels like it's almost the container for that really passionate physical part. Like, it's how we hold it and sustain it long term and how we keep growing it, and we have something like almost a vehicle to keep it in as we progress in our marriages. So I really appreciate you sharing that. It's like this is a huge part of intimacy that people don't really want to focus on because it's not as exciting sometimes. And in fact, it feels quite uncomfortable. I'm guessing it requires us to tolerate, you can tell me if it did or not in that moment, some uncomfortable emotions to pull back from the physical and say, okay, let me see you in something a little bit different than what I had on my agenda.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's those skills that you teach, Rhonda. It's like going inside and understanding the emotion, but not being overcome by that emotion too. So
Yeah, love
everyone
it.
needs to sign up for your coaching program because it's more than just sex, but it does help in
Thanks.
sex too.
Thank you, Dan.
All right, then the question is the other way around, right? What do men wish more women knew? And this is off the cuff too, but I think it's being desired and how valuable it is for men to be desired by their wives and desired sexually by their wives, desired emotionally by their wives. Women want to be desired by their husband too. But there's something special, especially we're talking in a dynamic that I think a lot of your listeners might be in, where they tend to be the one, they're the achiever, right? They're the achiever pattern. So they're the ones probably planning the vacations and the getaways with their wives. They're probably the ones thinking about sex and intimacy and how it's going to play out. They're the ones thinking about what gifts can I get to my wife that show my love for them. So they're the ones probably more on the execution side when it comes to showing desire. And you might be paired with a woman who has not those strengths. So I think a lot of women miss a very key way of loving and loving well in a marriage and being a good lover is to desire back. I think about the men and the couples I coach, and a common complaint is I just don't feel the same level of desire from her that I have for her. Like, it feels really one direction, and there's many reasons for that. They're probably contributing to the reason why they're not being desired, but I do think women in general, if they desired their husbands more or learned how to desire them sexually more for their own fulfillment, it does add more dimension and flavor and color and life to the relationship.
Yeah, I think many people, men and women alike, who are the higher functioners or maybe the over functioners sometimes, and we can say a word about that maybe. I think it feels really good to be taken care of in the bedroom when you feel like every place else you're the one who does. Um, Also, quick story about what you were saying. Sometimes we contribute to that. I was thinking about a wife who was on a call with her husband one time. And she said, when he started leaning into the emotion and he started telling me what his day was like and how difficult it was and being more vulnerable, she said, it was the first time that I even realized that he wanted to be taken care of by me or that he even wanted this feedback. She's like, he's always been so strong in taking care of everybody else. She felt like it didn't give her an opportunity to really move in and love on him and caretake. She almost felt like it was unwanted. And so to speak to what you're saying, many of my clients, they overfunction and caretake so much that I think it almost creates this dynamic where their partner doesn't even realize that they can come in and take care of them in a certain way. So anyway, I'm not blaming the listener for that, but it is,
Yes.
as you said, we're complicit in these dynamics that we get in. And again, we sometimes sabotage the very thing that we are craving the most.
I love that. That's great. I have one more thought on that. So there's a popular educator, speaker, teacher in our space, and she puts on seminars for men and intimacy, how they can become better lovers in their marriages. And she hired a new assistant. I attended one of these seminars, loved it, learned a lot from the teacher, but I also learned a lot from her assistant because this is really her first time hanging out with 50, 60 men over a few days and hearing all the men's stories. And she's like, "Holy cow, this has brought so much reassurance to me of how many good, genuinely good men there are, but also how many genuinely good men that are hurting, hoping, and wishing, their wives were more involved, sexually at least, in the relationship." And there's many reasons why there's those problems, but for her, she told me that she walked away from that realizing she's just always accommodated her husband. "Oh, he's in the mood? Oh, okay. I guess I can get there." She's always the accommodator and realizing, "Poor guy, that's awful for him to be married to someone that's just always being accommodated." So she started, like, putting a little more effort into her sexual relationship, and that's really improved their marriage in good ways too. I'm studying this book on eroticism, and it's absolutely fascinating. There are some parts of it that bring up a strong disgust response in me, though, I gotta say, and other parts that bring up a lot of interest and curiosity response in me. So, that being said, understanding your own eroticism is a fantastic journey to go on. Not something to be afraid of. But a lot of men who are executives, who are really about getting things done, accomplishing, and go, go, go. Maybe they have managers under them, they command teams of people, maybe big businesses. They actually want to be dominated once in a while. It feels so good just to surrender to someone else and just be dominated. And so, in a sexual domain, I do think sometimes role reversal is extremely fun and exciting and can add a lot of life into your relationship.
Yeah, I definitely see that too. And it can be the woman who has a lot of masculine energy as well as the doer, right? She
Yes,
often
she wants to be
craves.
submissive or whatever. Right.
Yeah, exactly. We just want to
Uh-huh.
break and to be
Be
taken care
taken.
of. Yeah,
Yes.
love it.
Oh,
I want
yeah.
to say one thing about what you said. The assistant said, like, oh, a poor guy who's being accommodated when she was talking about her husband. I was about to name who this person was, but I see why you didn't now. We'll let that be their story, that person in that space. But it's also really fulfilling for the person who's been accommodating. So we're talking about this as the lower desire partner, not accommodating, not doing duty and obligation. So it feels like they're desiring their partner more. But I think we you can't overstate how fun it can be for the person who's been used to accommodating to step into desire and feel that type of pleasure as a giver as well. Like it could be really exciting, not just change her husband's experience, obviously. And I don't think
Uh-huh.
you meant that at all. I just want to overtly call this out. Like it gets to change her experience and her happiness and her pleasure and her participation in a way that's really giving to her as well.
If I could be a
So I
little
love
more
that.
autobiographical and just in the hopes it helps a listener somewhere, maybe. My wife and I have been working on this. And so she'd make a little more effort. And then I'd get so excited. I'd like praise her up and down the next day or the next day after that. Like, that was so great, whatever. And she looked at me like, every time you thank me for what I did, it makes me want to do it less and less next time.
Ooh,
And
interesting.
it's because, and I'm so glad we have a relationship where she can talk honestly like this. It's because I'm trying reinforcing behavior, right? Like I'm giving her the attaboy to reinforce the behavior that I want more of. It's a manipulation, and she could feel it.
Yeah.
So I'm like, you're right. Oh, that hurt. But there's truth to that. I was totally doing it because I wanted more of it, right?
Yeah.
And then the pendulum swung the other way. She'd do something, and I would totally like stuff and stifle my excitement. And then she's not getting the reaction she's hoping to get because I'm afraid to react too much. So overreacting is bad, underreacting is bad too. So it's something we've had to work on in our relationship a bit. But always watch your energy. Am I saying things, doing things because I'm trying to reinforce the behavior? That's again stage 2. You're focused so much on the other person's reaction to your behavior to get an outcome that you want instead of stage 3.
Yeah. I'm just sitting here thinking of Pavlov's dog. It's like a science experiment, right? Ring a bell and
Yeah.
I'll salivate.
Yeah, don't treat your wife like a dog. No.
Yeah, exactly. But what I think is so valuable to go back to here is the intention, right? We talked about this
Mhm.
before in a different scenario,
Context.
but
Mhm.
yeah, it's the same thing here. It's is the intention to try to get her to do something differently so then I can feel. It's like you were talking about on the Ferris wheel, the chase, avoid, or the pursue, avoid. It's like I'm trying to manage her behavior to manage my emotions. It gets so convoluted when you do that, you guys, and it's exhausting. And so many of us are doing it. I've done it myself at times. Can I manage them so I can feel a certain way? It does two things. It makes them feel terrible, but it also completely takes you out of your sense of self and your power. Like it's so disempowering to have somebody else do something so you can be okay in your own skin
Yeah.
or bed.
Not to mention draining
Yeah.
and sucks all your energy.
Yeah.
That's not fun.
100%.
Uh-huh.
100%. Well, Dan, thank you so much for this conversation. I have so enjoyed it, and I hope our listeners will take all these golden nuggets and tuck them away, and they will pop up in their minds just at the right time when they need it in their relationships. Will you go ahead and tell our listeners where they can find you if they want to hear more from you or check out the app or your individual offerings?
Thank you. The best place is my website, getyourmarriageon.com. From there, you'll find links to download my apps. Intimately Us is the most popular app, and it's a great app if you want to spice things up without the yuck. It's a really fun bedroom game that's not raunchy or crass. I also have a program for couples called the Get Your Marriage On program. It's my signature program. It includes coaching plus a course plus a community. So it's this trifecta of a great combination that helps couples really have great sex and great deeper intimacy in their relationship. I also have the podcast, as you mentioned, and I have retreats. So all that you'll see at getyourmarriageon.com.
And your retreats are in Utah, right? So, I mean, you can come from anywhere, but a lot of our listeners are
Yes.
probably close by where the retreats would be.
Yes. Yep. St. George, Utah, and near Zion National Park. So it's beautiful. It's great. I've done retreats for years and they're fantastic.
Excellent. All right. Thank you again for your time. It's so fun to have you.
Great. Thank you.